Before we begin our journey on this tranquil night, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us where you're joining from. It's always delightful to discover where our listeners rest their heads as they travel with us through these ancient memories. The elixirs of eternal sleep, the silent quest of the monks for paradise in dreams. Ah, what a serene night awaits us. Close your eyes and allow yourself to sense the aroma of beeswax candles and old wood, the gentle crackle of flames in a distant hearth, the murmur of the wind timidly brushing against the cold stones of an isolated monastery. It was in this setting, beneath dark vaults and narrow windows covered with thin animal hides, that medieval monks, in their coarse robes and with hands calloused from daily labor, gave themselves over to a curious and, to us, somewhat unsettling ritual. Between whispered psalms and rosary beads slipping through worn fingers, they prepared elixirs, simple potions made from herbs gathered around the cloister. Poppies, mandrakes, henbane, each chosen as a key to unlock the doors of sleep. The goal: to visit paradise, to walk among angels, to feel, if only for fleeting moments stolen from slumber, the warmth of divine light that promised peace to restless souls. The preparations began while the last light of dusk still lingered, when the sky blushed purple and the chant of vespers echoed against the damp stones of the cloister. The friars, wrapped in heavy cloaks smelling of smoke and incense, gathered in the small apothecary of the monastery, where rustic shelves held green-tinted glass vials and linen pouches filled with dried leaves and twisted roots. There, under the flickering glow of a small lamp, the eldest, usually a brother with weary eyes and a soft voice, would grind the herbs in a stone mortar, reciting prayers in Latin as if asking nature itself to reveal its secrets. The dull thud of the pestle mixed with the hiss of the wind, and the sweet, earthy scent of the plants filled the air, promising dreams of peace, though perhaps concealing the risk of a sleep from which there was no return. When the mixture was finally ready, a thick dark brew kept in small ceramic chalices adorned with rough-hewn crosses, each monk withdrew to his cell, that narrow stone space where the outside world seemed not to exist. Before drinking the elixir, there was one last gesture, a brief prayer before the crucifix worn by time, a whisper asking that the vision of paradise come without deceit, without the shadows of demons that sometimes lurked in the deepest dreams. Then, with a hesitant sip, the liquid went down, hot and bitter, warming the chest and making the eyelids heavy, so heavy, like the gates of heaven waiting to be opened in the night. And so, wrapped in the thick silence of dawn, the monks slept, seeking the angels, and secretly fearing they might not wake again. The first hours of sleep were gentle, lulled by chants that seemed to still echo through the stone corridors and by a light warmth that spread through the body like the touch of invisible hands. Many awoke before sunrise with tales of flowered fields, rivers of light, and celestial choirs that welcomed them in arms of peace. Others, however, sank into dense dreams where visions blurred with delirium, and the faces of saints mingled with the twisted laughter of demons. It was an uncertain territory, this realm of the monk's sleep, a land of divine promises, but also of snares for souls daring to seek them with the aid of nature and its mysterious herbs. When dawn finally bathed the monastery walls in gold, not all the brothers rose for the Lords. Some still lay motionless on their straw beds, prisoners of a deep stupor, their faces pale like the wax of the candles consumed during the vigil. Then the eldest, with calm steps and eyes heavy with compassion and fear, went from cell to cell, checking who had returned from the dream journey and who, perhaps, had gone beyond toward eternal sleep. Sometimes a friar was found with a serene smile, as if he had truly glimpsed paradise. Other times, the expression was of unease, as if nightmares had been his last companions on that nocturnal crossing. Among the cold corridors and the lingering scent of the herbs burned the night before, Whispers spoke of the dangers of those elixirs. The apothecary brother, with sunken eyes and fingers stained by the brews he prepared, silently pondered whether the balance of the doses had been right, or whether, in their longing for divine visions, an excess of mandrake or belladonna had sealed destinies. Yet despite the danger, the ritual persisted, for the promise of touching, even in a dream, the mysteries of heaven was too sweet to abandon. And so, as the light of day bathed the cloister, the friars returned to their work, gathering new plants, preparing new ointments, ready for another night in search of paradise between veils of sleep and silence. Over the seasons, the recipes changed, as if the monks themselves tried to decipher a divine code hidden in the perfumes of the herbs and the bitterness of the brews. Some nights brought peace, dreams filled with eternal gardens, crystalline fountains, celestial choirs that seemed to soothe even the most tormented hearts. Others, however, plunged the friars into abysses of shadows where shapes were distorted and the whispers of darkness seemed closer than the song of angels. But whatever the outcome of each journey, at the end of every night the monastery filled with a strange reverence, as if those who awoke knew they had walked the thin boundary between the divine and the unknown, carrying in their weary gaze a secret not even the wisest dared speak aloud. And so, night after night, the monks continued between courage and hope, surrendering to those potions that promised open doors to the sacred, but sometimes led only to deep oblivion. The sound of the bells at daybreak echoed as a call back to the world of the living, and each awakening was celebrated in silence, with a glance at the pale sky and a murmured thanks for one more morning granted. The eldest friars taught the younger ones to respect the mystery of the herbs, reminding them in low voices and with trembling hands that there are paths to paradise that need not be hastened. And in the solitude of the cell, as he prepared for another night, each monk knew the true dream was the one from which you could wake. As the years passed, the monastery became known not only for its prayers and chants, but also for the tales of visions that occasionally escaped the lips of dreamers at dawn. Pilgrims arrived, drawn by stories of monks who walked with angels in their dreams, and some would ask for a vial of the elixir, as if the recipe could be shared like bread at the table of the humble. But the brothers, with a discreet smile and a deep gaze, offered only soft words and an invitation to prayer, for they knew deep down, true paradise is not reached through shortcuts or potions, but through the slow and serene journey of the soul in search of the light. And so, as the wind continued its path among the ancient stones, the monastery remained a guardian of secrets, dreams, and the delicate thread that separates sleep from eternity. The ointments of silent flight, dreams, delirium, and the witches who touch the sky. Take a deep breath and imagine yourself in an isolated cabin, in the heart of a forest asleep under the soft light of the moon. The wind plays among the trees, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant whisper of owls. Inside, by the flickering glow of an oil lamp, a woman with disheveled hair and watchful eyes mixes in an ancient mortar substances as curious as they are dangerous. Dark leaves of henbane, twisted roots of mandrake, withered petals of belladonna, ingredients that together would give form to the famous flying ointment. But the flight they promised was not with wings, but of the mind, a tortuous journey through worlds where the real and the imagined intertwined like shadows in the mist. As the clay cauldron released sweet and slightly bitter vapors, the woman carefully spread the mixture over her skin, choosing the most sensitive spots, wrists, temples, and even regions hidden beneath the folds of dark garments. The chill of the night seemed to retreat, replaced by a warm wave, rising from the extremities to the heart, as if the forest itself bent in silence to witness what was to come. And then the flight began. Half-closed eyes saw beyond the cabin walls, the sounds of the night transformed into ancient melodies. and the soul, light and daring, crossed invisible fields, danced among the stars, and touched the doors of worlds where legends were as real as the soil beneath the feet. The body, motionless, remained bound to the earth, but the spirit, guided by the herbs and by delirium, slid free like the wind through the branches. The hours passed slowly as the mind sailed through enchanted and, at times, shadowed landscapes. The visions could be of feasts under the moon, banquets beside ethereal beings, or bold flights over sleeping villages where the hearth flames looked like stars upon the ground. But not all dreams were sweet. Sometimes the ointments opened doors to labyrinths of shadows where deformed creatures and twisted smiles lurked, and the sky became a heavy cloak that threatened to collapse. The awakening, when it came, was slow and hazy. The woman rose from the packed earth floor as one returning from afar, her eyes wandering between the real and what had been lost in the mists of delirium. And around her, only the murmur of the forest, indifferent to the silent journeys that unfolded there night after night. As the seasons passed, the recipes for these ointments spread in whispers among villages and forests, always shrouded in mystery and fear. Some said that just smelling the mixture was enough to give thoughts wings. Others swore they had seen women floating in the dusk, carried by the wind and by witchcraft. But the elders, with eyes marked by time, knew the true flight of these witches was that of the imagination, of the spirit intoxicated by the plants that nature guarded so jealously. And so, between delirium and legend, the myth of the flying witches was born, not mounted on brooms or winged creatures, but guided by ointments that turned the night into a stage for the boldest dreams and the oldest fears. And when the dawn painted the horizon with shades of pink and gold, only traces of those invisible flights remained. Faint marks in the soil around the cabin, the lingering scent of herbs in the cold morning air, and the distant gaze of the women who, for an instant, had crossed the boundaries of what was possible. The villages, upon hearing such tales, mingled respect with fear. To some, they were wise women who touched the veils of the beyond. To others, sorceresses who danced alongside the shadows. But the truth, whispered by the wind among the branches, remained simple and eternal. The ointments gave them no wings, only freed the spirit to fly where the body would never dare to follow. And so, beneath the cloak of night, their journeys continued, between dream and legend, between earth and sky. The wine of visions, feasts, delirium, and the hidden secrets of medieval goblets. Picture yourself in a grand medieval hall where the crackling of the hearth echoes off stone walls and the aroma of roasted meat and herbs mingles with that of freshly served wine. The candles flicker, casting dancing shadows over faces flushed with heat and joy. It is a night of celebration at the castle, and goblets are raised in enthusiastic toasts as troubadours sing ancient songs. But among the cauldrons and jugs, there is a secret few dare speak aloud. The wine of that night was prepared with more than crushed grapes. Mystical herbs, gathered under the light of the moon, were macerated in the ruby liquid, promising to heal pains, ward off evil spirits, and in certain doses open portals to the unseen. As the night progresses and the goblets empty and refill again, the hall transforms. The laughter of the guests grows louder, their words looser, and their gazes drift, now lost in the flames of the hearth, now upon the tapestries that, under the influence of the medicated wine, seem to come alive. Some lords, once proud upon their carved oak seats, now gesture toward the void, recounting visions of saints, celestial battles, and forest creatures they swear peer through the hall's great windows. The local priest, discreet in a corner, watches with growing concern as the murmurs of the revelers turn into confused prayers or proclamations of new commandments, born not from the gospel, but from the burning mixture of wine and herbs coursing through their veins like fire and mist, And when dawn approaches, wrapping the castle in the cool shroud of dew, the feast that began as a celebration transforms into a strange theatre of delirium and sighs. Some, lying beneath the great table, whisper of having spoken with angels. Others point to the dark-beamed ceiling, certain they see stars that never shone there. The feudal lord, once master of himself, now stands upon the dais, eyes gleaming in the dimness, uttering fragmented words that blend scripture with premonitions of bountiful harvests and divine storms. The priest, his habit clutched tightly in his hands, begins to recite quiet prayers, begging that the effects of the wine dissolve with the rising sun. As the hall slowly falls silent beneath the weight of exhausted bodies and souls lost in the labyrinths of dream and illusion. When daylight finally breaks over the castle's towers, the soft morning light reveals the scene of the night before. Toppled goblets, ruby stains upon the stone floor, and lords and ladies strewn about like soldiers after an invisible battle. The more fortunate awaken slowly, their heads heavy, their eyes burning, trying to recall whether the visions were divine gifts or merely phantoms of the wine. The feudal lord, now hunched in his throne like a traveler returned from distant lands, avoids the priest's gaze, aware that his prophecies of the night are already spreading from mouth to mouth in the village. And so, as the servants quietly gather the remnants of the feast, the castle sinks into a silence heavy with reflection, and perhaps with vows that the next banquet will come only with pure wine and sincere prayers. The forgotten vial, memories of a potion and a love undone. Our dear traveler, close your eyes and picture yourself in a village asleep beneath the soft cloak of an autumn sky, where the flames of the torches fade one by one, and the air is filled with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. I was young then, an apprentice herbalist, with more enthusiasm than sense, and a heart that beat fast for someone who barely knew my name. It was on nights like this, beneath the whisper of the wind in the oak canopies, that I learned love, when mixed in vials, rarely follows the path one hopes. On the edge of the village lived an old wise woman, with steady hands and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of 1,000 winters. To her I went, driven by a desire as ardent as it was foolish. "A love potion?" I asked, my voice nearly lost in the crackle of the hearth that warmed that small cottage. With a smile that blended compassion and mischief, she handed me a trembling vial of amber liquid, made, she said, from mandrake roots, wild rose petals, and a touch of wild honey. I left with the vial hidden beneath my cloak, feeling the warmth of the glass against my chest as if it were a talisman. The high moon lit my path, and each step felt lighter than the last, carried by the naive hope of a young heart. The next morning, in the village market, amid the hum of merchants and the sweet scent of freshly picked apples, I waited for the right moment. When I saw my beloved approach, her golden braids shining in the sun and her basket full of steaming bread, I poured a drop of the potion into her mead cup, my heart pounding like the church bells on a feast day. But oh, dear listener, the gods of love are whimsical. What followed was not an enamored gaze, nor sweet words whispered among the market's murmurs. Instead, she seemed confused, then amused, and at last enchanted. But not by me. My poor friend Thomas, the round-faced baker with the easy laugh, was the one to receive the glances and smiles I had so dreamed of, and I was left to watch, in a mixture of wonder and regret, as the two exchanged words and promises beneath the curious gaze of the neighbors. The days that followed became a curious spectacle, as if the entire village had been woven into that farce of love. Thomas, now consumed by a fervor even he did not seem to understand, began to court her with the devotion of a knight in a tournament, leaving sweetbreads at her door, composing clumsy verses recited at dusk, and once even attempting to offer her a bouquet of nettles, mistaking the leaves in his haste. And the young woman, at times flattered, at times perplexed, came to be followed by a troop of children, eager to witness the baker's next feat of love. And I found myself fleeing curious looks and indiscreet questions, for it didn't take long before the village's gossips began to whisper of that potion and the foolish apprentice who sought shortcuts to love. Even the dogs seemed to sniff out my embarrassment as I passed by, head down. And one night, when the moon was a thin silver thread in the sky, I found myself pursued by a group of young men, too emboldened by the tavern's wine, shouting mocking verses about potions, flowers, and foolish hearts. I took refuge in the fields, among the sweet scent of night flowers and the whisper of the wind, reflecting on the winding paths of love and the mischief of wicked roots. As the weeks passed, the confusion stirred by that dubious brew began to dissolve, like the morning mist rising from the fields at the sun's first touch. Thomas, one day, awoke as if from a strange dream and laughed at his own antics, while the young woman, with a kind glance, offered him a warm loaf as a token of friendship and nothing more. The village, which had so enjoyed the episode, soon turned its attention to new rumors. A horse that vanished into the forest, a pig that had learned to open the stable door, and other wonders typical of those ancient lands. And I learned that hearts are not won with potions or tricks, but with patience and truth. I kept that empty vial in the leather pouch at my belt, not as a reminder of failure, but as a quiet charm, a silent warning against the tempting shortcuts youth so often offers. And when I walk today, among the ruins of that village, where wildflowers cover the old paths and the wind tells secrets only the old can hear, I smile at the boy I once was, and at the lesson life was quick to teach with a single sip. And so, night after night, as the fading hearth invites sleep and the moonlight bathes the slumbering fields, I revisit in thought that time and that vial, and realize how much the paths of the heart are like the forest's trails, winding, at times dark, but always more beautiful when walked with courage and without deceit. And if some traveler like you now lies down to hear these memories, may they carry with them this simple truth. No herb, root, or flower can replace the magic of a sincere gaze or the warmth of a feeling cultivated day by day, like the gardener who tends the rose bush without haste. So, dear listener, may this story rest with you, like the whisper of the wind through the trees and the distant crackle of a friendly fire. May the dreams that await you be sweet, free of the confusions of potions, and full of the sense of honesty and true affection. And when the morning bells call in a new day, may your heart awaken light, like that village that one day smiled again after a season of strange pursuits and unlikely marriages. Good night, and may the stars watch over your rest, among leaves and sentences, the whispered secrets of the healer's garden. I remember well a certain village where I spent much of my youth, when the breath of the wind carried the damp scent of earth, and the whisper of the leaves seemed to bring messages from ancient gods. There, at the edge of a twisted wood, lived the old healer, master of a garden as feared as it was revered. It was a strange and enchanting patch of land, enclosed by crooked fences and covered with vegetation that coiled like green serpents. The flowers, in colors so vivid they seemed to burn in the shade, competed with the acrid aroma of herbs drying on the hanging cords. And the air. The air felt heavier there, as if each breeze came laden with promises and warnings. I was still a curious and restless boy then, and I often spent my afternoons watching that man, with his thick beard and eyes that shone like amber at dusk. Between his calloused hands, roots, leaves, and flowers transformed into remedies that eased fevers and pains, but also, the elders whispered, could bring ruin to those who dared abuse their power. The healer's garden was more than a refuge of knowledge. It was a perilous threshold between healing and condemnation. A pinch too much of belladonna in an ointment, a drop too much of mandrake extract, and what was meant to save could become a sentence. On new moon nights, many claimed to see hooded figures lurking near the fences, either fearful or hungry for secrets that, if misunderstood, could lead them straight to the claws of the Inquisition tribunal. There was an almost superstitious respect for the old healer, and not without reason. The garden hid mysteries few dared to fully decipher. In the pale dawn light, one could see the mist dancing among rows of rue, hemlock and henbane, as if the air itself hesitated to enter among those plants of ambiguous power. It was a place where nature revealed its two faces, the one that heals with tenderness and the one that takes with discretion. Travelers passing through the village avoided looking too long at that singular garden, fearing to attract some ill omen, or worse, the suspicion of inquisitors who, from time to time, appeared with cold eyes and sharp questions. I remember well the muffled sound of the church bells, rung at improper hours, a sign that something or someone had crossed the invisible line of what was acceptable. A rumor was enough, a mere rumor, that a desperate mother had sought relief for her child's fever in that garden, and soon the smoke of the village patrol's torches appeared on the horizon. The healer would walk calmly to the roadside, his gaze serene, yet firm, ready to explain once again that the same herb that could save a life was the one that, in the wrong dose or in the wrong hands, could seal a fate before the tribunal. And as the night wind carried the pungent scent of crushed leaves, all knew that in that garden dwelled not only remedies, but also the echoes of judgments waged not just among men, but between wisdom and fear. One night, I recall an episode that made the very forest hold its breath. A young apprentice, newly arrived from distant lands, decided to prove the worth of his studies and ventured among the healer's beds without permission or guide. Driven by the thirst for knowledge, or perhaps by the vanity of those who believe they know more than they should, he gathered seeds from a plant entwined with flowers dark as midnight. He mixed them into a preparation he intended for an ailing villager. But what he achieved only awakened dread. The victim fell into a deep sleep, and, upon waking, muttered disjointed words, as if speaking with shadows. And as fate enjoys playing with the haste of men, the sound of this mistake reached the wrong ears, sending the boy straight to the relentless grip of the Inquisition. The old healer could do nothing but quietly gather the leaves the apprentice had dropped in his rush to justify himself. Around the garden, murmurs grew louder. Some said forbidden spells lay hidden there, others that the fault lay in the ignorance of men and not in the generosity of the plants. The nights that followed were marked by a thick silence, broken only by the rustling of the herbs in the wind and the distant creak of cartwheels carrying new prisoners to the tribunal. The garden, however, remained steadfast and mysterious, a living reminder that nature's power belongs neither to those who fear it, nor to those who judge it, but to those who know how to listen with humility to the secrets whispered by the falling leaves at nightfall. As the seasons passed, that garden became a territory where few dared tread, except in moments of desperation or when hope faded like the mist over the fields at dawn. And even the bravest, upon crossing the small gate of worm-eaten wood, would lower their gaze in a sign of respect, or was it fear? The healer, with his measured gestures and voice low as the murmur of brooks, continued tending his plants, watering with steady hands the roots long intertwined with the very soul of the earth. Each leaf picked was a considered choice, each infusion prepared, an act of faith, for he knew one drop too many, and the remedy became poison, one thoughtless touch, and the cure turned to sentence. At dusk, I liked to sit beneath an old willow from where I could watch that man in his near-sacred craft. The setting sun cast the garden in a melancholy golden hue, and the air filled with the perfume of the night flowers that timidly opened, as if to console afflicted hearts. And in those moments I understood. More than a garden of herbs, it was a place of fragile balance between trust and fear, between ancient knowledge and the shadow of the Inquisitor's pyre. The healer was neither sorcerer nor saint, just a guardian of nature's secrets, walking the thin line that separated salvation from the abyss. As the nights deepened and cold winds began to descend from the hills, the garden grew even more enigmatic. The shadows of the plants, once mere soft shapes beneath the moonlight, seemed to gain lives of their own, dancing to the rhythm of the wind and the crackling of distant hearthwood. The villagers said that on the quietest nights, one could hear the laments of former accused souls, coming to bid farewell to the leaves that once condemned or saved them. And the healer, alone in his small shelter, kept working as if each root pulled, each flower picked, was a plea for forgiveness offered to time itself, that watches all and judges all. The Inquisitors, from time to time, still returned, their heavy cloaks dragging through the dust of the road, their eyes hungry for signs of heresy hidden among stems and petals. But the garden, in its strange harmony, always received them the same way, with the silence of one who has nothing to hide and at the same time hides everything. And so, generation after generation, that patch of earth remained, untouched by the fire of ignorance, protected by the respect of those who knew and feared that the true power of herbs lay not in their appearance, but in the deep secret they carried, that healing and condemnation are sisters, separated only by the wisdom of the one who gathers. And so I learned, through those silent years beside the old healer, that the true mystery of the plants was not in their hard names or their feared effects, but in the humility they demanded of those who approached them. Each leaf, each root, each tiny blossom carried with it an ancient lesson, that knowledge must walk hand in hand with respect, and that the greatest danger was not the herb itself, but the hasty heart or the mind that failed to hear the whispers of the earth. The garden, with its strong scents and colors faded by time, remained a refuge for the afflicted and a mirror for the vain, showing each exactly what they carried within. Today, when I close my eyes and let memory take me back to that garden, I can almost smell the lavender mingled with rosemary, hear the rustling leaves and the soft creak of the fence's wood in the breeze. And I understand, with a serenity that only the years can give, that that patch of land was, at heart, a symbol of the human spirit itself, capable of the purest good and the darkest evil, depending only on the hand that guides it and the purpose that moves it. May we, as we recall such stories, learn to gather wisely and walk gently, whether in the garden of herbs or in the gardens of life.